Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Wednesday the 23rd of February 2022. News. Nuclear energy chiefs under fire over cheaper than renewables claims. This article is by David Ball. A coalition of energy experts have hit out at claims by the nuclear industry, warning that the SNP government embracing the extremely costly and inflexible technology will add to fuel poverty as consumers grapple with the cost of living crisis. The Scottish Government was criticised last week after admitting it had failed to carry out any specific modelling on the impact of Scotland's last two nuclear power stations closing down on energy prices. Energy policy is largely reserved to Westminster, but the Scottish Government can effectively veto power developments over 50 megawatts being built and is opposed to nuclear power. But the UK Government is pressing ahead with nuclear power being a key part in the future energy mix alongside renewables. The Nuclear Industries Association has claimed that the low and predictable operating costs of the technology make it a cheaper option than renewables for the Scottish Government, claiming the energy has saved consumers on average £152 since the cost of living crisis began. But SNP Net Zero Energy and Transport Secretary Michael Matheson has disputed the analysis. Now, analysis by organisations claims that the industry body has distorted the figures by ignoring capital costs and the money needed to decommission former sites, as well as funding needed to manage radioactive waste. The coalition is claiming that nuclear power costs £44 more than renewables over the same period of time, adding the calculation doesn't include a £2,000 eventual cost per person living in Britain today for decommissioning UK's nuclear facilities. The organisations have stressed that calculating renewables without including the capital costs would create an effective price per megawatt of zero, adding that nuclear costs Scotland £104 million more than if it had been generated from renewable sources. The analysis concludes that it equates to every electricity customer in Scotland paying £44 more just to keep nuclear going. The current cost for renewable electricity is between £20 and £40 per megawatt, which the coalition says is in stark contrast against the £100 per megawatt for new nuclear at Hinkley Point C. Commenting on the analysis, Keith Baker of the Commonweal Energy Group said, "Building new nuclear plants will only exacerbate fuel poverty. Any talk of a nuclear renaissance, particularly when spiralling energy prices are pushing more and more households into fuel poverty, smacks of desperation from an industry that should already be consigned to the dustbin of history. It's a simple case of buy now, pay even more later." Stuart Parkinson, Executive Director of Scientists for Global Responsibility, said there is strong evidence of close institutional and financial ties between the civilian and military nuclear industries in the UK, both in the public sector and the private sector. These help to bolster the influence of nuclear interests, even though the case for civilian use of nuclear power is markedly inferior to that of renewables on the ground of economics, speed of deployment, environmental sustainability, safety and security. Paul Dorfman, chair of the Nuclear Consulting Group, said, "The central message, repeated again and again, that a new generation of nuclear will be clean and safe is a fiction. The reality is nuclear is an extremely costly and inflexible technology with the potential to cause significant harm. Not forgetting that coastal nuclear is at ramping risk from climate-driven sea level rise, storm surge and flooding, with nuclear industry and regulatory mitigation efforts becoming increasingly obsolete. Scottish Greens Energy and Climate spokesperson Mark Russell said, "You only need to look at Hinkley Point to realise that nuclear is very expensive, and the UK government seemed desperate to pass that cost directly onto energy consumers. Not only that, nuclear power generates a legacy of toxic waste to pass on to future generations." Scotland has amazing potential in clean renewable energy, but it requires the political will to meet that. With Greens in government, Scotland is paving the way for expansion, but while energy policy is reserved, we've seen vast subsidies channelled into fossil fuels and nuclear by successive UK governments, with no indication that this is going to change anytime soon. But Tom Greatrex, the Chief Executive of the Nuclear Industry Association, has insisted that Scotland's experience shows, and every expert analysis attests, that renewables and nuclear working together is the most cost-effective route to decarbonisation. He added, "The energy crisis has shown we need to cut our reliance on fossil fuels, and we need all the low-carbon power we can get to achieve that. Our cost calculations are based on the fact that nuclear power is sold on the market at £45 per megawatt. The low price is a consequence of nuclear's low and predictable operating costs, and the cost of building the stations being paid off some time ago. The Hinkley Point C strike price is on a par with renewable projects financed through contracts for difference, CFD, with offshore wind and onshore wind averaging £97.38 and £95.55 respectively. All energy sources have to deal with their own decommissioning, and nuclear is the only industry which tracks, safely manages and pays for its own legacy. Decommissioning the AGR fleet and Sizewell B will cost less than 1/5 of what these critics have claimed, and the cost will be spread over 100 years, according to the National Audit Office. Money has already been set aside in the Nuclear Liabilities Fund to cover the substantial majority of these costs." This article is by David Ball.
Forwarded from the Herald on the 23rd of February 2022, from the sports section. SFA and SPFL update Scottish football protocols after Nicola Sturgeon's COVID restrictions announcement. By Aidan Smith. The SFA and the SPFL Joint Response Group have updated their Scottish football protocols following Nicola Sturgeon's COVID-19 update yesterday. Scotland has followed England in announcing plans to end some coronavirus restrictions, with the legal requirement to wear face masks in some settings to be scrapped from March 21st. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon also revealed the country's certification scheme will come to an end on Monday, February 28th. Scottish football clubs will now only need to carry out lateral flow tests on match days, and on non-match days tests will only have to be carried out for players or staff who are symptomatic. The JRG has confirmed that this will be reviewed over the coming weeks, and the match day lateral flow tests could be axed. Scottish football clubs will no longer have to spot check supporters either, with the passport scheme having come to an end. A statement read, following confirmation from the First Minister that Scotland's legal COVID-19 restrictions will end on March 21st, the Joint Response Group, JRG, has updated the Scottish football protocols. From next Monday, 28th of February, clubs will be required to carry out lateral flow tests on a match day for all playing and team staff. On non-match days, clubs will only be required to test symptomatic players and staff, but they may, of course, supplement this minimum requirement with an additional testing programme should they wish. The JRG will review the data from the matchday testing regime over the coming weeks, with a view to moving to symptomatic testing only. With the Scottish Government also ending the passport scheme on 28th of February, clubs will also no longer be required to spot check supporters for vaccination status from that date. We would continue to recommend that supporters take an LFT before leaving home on match day. The article was by Aidan Smith.
Herald Scotland recorded on Wednesday 23rd of February 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Billy Connolly, Night I Hit a Photographer and the Herald Caught Me. By Alison Rowett, Senior Politics and Features Writer. What happens in tour stays in tour has been the mantra of performers from Sinatra to the Rolling Stones. Not for Billy Connolly though, who lifts the lid in some of his wilder times in a new television series starting tomorrow. The Scots comedian toured with acts including Elton John, Elvis Costello and Led Zeppelin, but his most candid revelations in the 7-part Billy Connolly Does fall closer to home. Sir Billy, 79, who has Parkinson's, moved to the Florida Keys with his wife Pamela Stevenson and their family in 2018. It was there he spoke to filmmaker Mike Riley about subjects including his partial regret at punching press photographers, the night he watched Jerry Rafferty take control of an SNP campaign car, and the too brief friendship with Keith Moon that left the comedian bereft. Though hailed as a national treasure today, Connolly's relationship with the media was not always so friendly. Riley reminds him of a brilliant photo of you smacking a member of the paparazzi. The picture comes from the archives of the Herald and shows Connolly grabbing photographer Stuart Bell outside the Drury Lane Theatre in London in September 1981. You're giving him a right old thump, says the filmmaker. I've battered a few of them, says Connolly. I was in the middle of a divorce and my children and wife were in Scotland, and I was with Pam in London. It was impossible to stay sane, being chased by the paparazzi, so I lashed out. It's always a huge mistake hitting them. They love it. When you're hitting one, the rest of them are taking pictures of you doing it. You can't win. In his stage show, Connolly once said of his tussles with photographers, "That's what they're there for. I'll stop punching them when they start sharing the money." Happier memories come from his early days in tour with Jerry Rafferty, who founded the Humble Bums with Connolly. One night the Humble Bums played Gourock. The booker was a kiltie, says Connolly, a great pusher of the Scottish Nationalist Party. He drove them home in the early hours. When they got to just outside Johnson, Rafferty noticed the loudhailers in the car and switched the microphone on. "People of Johnson," Rafferty announced, "you're in great trouble tonight. A truck bearing a load of snakes, poison snakes, has crashed just outside Johnson. We last heard they were heading into Johnson. Leave your house, assemble on the steps of the town hall. Old people can be carried on your shoulders. Don't bother with your valuables. They will be brought to you later." Jerry was a scream, says Connolly. He used to have me on the floor, on my hands and knees. Any time anybody saw Jerry, he was straight-faced, played these beautiful songs, great melodies that he'd composed. They'd never think he was capable of this. In the first episode titled Bad Behaviour, Connolly recalls a night out with John Hurt, the actor, and Keith Moon. He had met the Who drummer for the first time that night. He was being very funny and chatting away, and I thought, God, what a nice guy. What a good new friend to have. I got up in the morning and flew to Australia, got to my hotel room, and I put the television on, and he was dead. I was absolutely broken-hearted. I only knew him for a couple of hours, but I was devastated, because I was really looking forward to having him as a friend, looking to the future with him. An end to the hard drinking tours came when he met Pamela. Marriage to Pam, it didn't change me, it saved me, he says. I thought I might lose my wildness, and then I thought, well, it's not wildness, it's pretendy wildness. You know how to turn it on, and that won't go away, and it didn't go away. Billy Connolly Does, Thursday, 9 p.m, Gold, by Alison Rowett.
The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 24th of February 2022. News. Glasgow firm Arcadi Solutions helping make offices safer, by Carolyn Wilson, Senior Reporter. A part-remote, part-office schedule has been hailed as the future of work. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said earlier this week that the government will continue to recommend hybrid working for the foreseeable future to reduce coronavirus transmission risks. Now, a Glasgow firm has come up with a solution for staff who are nervous about coming back to busy offices. Arcadi Solutions has developed technology that allows employees to check on how many colleagues are in the workplace before booking a desk or meeting room. The company said it's essential that employers are able to offer a safe environment for workers. With many firms downsizing to smaller offices, space is likely to be at a premium, and the Your Spaces app allows employees to book a desk or a meeting room for an allotted time. Despite only launching the technology last year, Arcadi has landed a number of major clients, including Canon, which is rolling the technology to its 16,000 employees across Europe. A number of Scottish local authorities have also expressed an interest in the app. Lindsay Clemson, commercial director and one of the company's founders, said, "I think everyone is trying to get their head round how to come back to the office safely. People are very cautious about COVID. Everyone is having to make decisions about what works well for them and what doesn't, and doing it at different paces so that there isn't a big bang approach, and it's how employers manage that. A lot of companies have given up property and downsized. This allows employees to choose where they want to be and when. The app can show you that the office has 80% capacity on certain days, and you could book a parking space or a specific desk." She said the app would also be strategically useful for companies, enabling them to track how many workers are using the office, minimise risk at peak times, and plan for the longer term. It would also allow people with disabilities attending a meeting or interview to check a building is fully accessible. Glasgow Disability Alliance said there were many cases where people were invited for interviews in buildings which they are unable to enter. This article was written by Caroline Wilson. The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 24th of February 2022. News. Putin nuclear war threat. What is Russia's nuclear capability? By Carlos Simon, SEO journalist. It was confirmed earlier today, Thursday, February the 24th, by Russian President Vladimir Putin that Russia will conduct a military operation inside Ukraine. Mr. Putin said the action comes in response to threats coming from Ukraine. He added that Russia does not have a goal to occupy Ukraine, but said the responsibility for bloodshed lies with the Ukrainian regime. Mr. Putin also warned other countries that any attempt to interfere with the Russian action would lead to consequences they have never seen. Prime Minister Boris Johnson replied, saying that Putin had chosen a path of bloodshed and destruction with his attack on Ukraine and that the UK and its allies would respond decisively. What are Russia's nuclear weapon capabilities? Due to Putin's threats, talk of nuclear weapons has once again arisen. Russia has the world's largest arsenal of nuclear weapons, with a 6,257-strong fleet, which include 527 intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and strategic bombers. ICBMs can get up to a top speed of 4 miles per second in about 10 minutes after launch, meaning the weapons could potentially reach the UK from Russia within 20 minutes. According to the Express Army veteran and nuclear war researcher, Christopher Whitman previously claimed that if Russia sent for the UK, it would aim for 6 Royal Air Force bases. These include Plymdales in Yorkshire, Alconbury near Huntingdon, and Lakenheath and Milden Hall, both in Suffolk. Other RAF bases that could be targeted in the event of a nuclear attack include Croton in Northamptonshire and Barford St John in Oxfordshire. More potential targets could include 3 Royal Navy bases, HNMB Clyde in Scotland, HNMB Devonport in Plymouth, and HNMB Portsmouth. Russia also did recently launch 2 military ballistic missiles in tests ordered by Mr. Putin. This article was written by Carlos Simon. The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 24th of February 2022. News. Snow and lightning in Scotland as Scots wake to thunder snow blizzard, by Josh Carmichael. Scots have woken up to blizzard-like conditions this morning as a Met Office warning for snow and lightning remains in effect. Another danger to life alert is in place throughout Thursday for large parts of Scotland, and the Met Office have forecast power cuts and heavy travel disruption. The warning has been in place since 5 p.m. on Wednesday and will last until 8 p.m. tonight, and the combination of high winds and snowfall and frequent lightning could result in thunder snow in places. A small chance of injuries and danger to life from lightning strikes remains, and some rural communities could face major power outages and become cut off. Travel disruption is also expected, with the Met Office predicting rail, air and ferry services to be significantly disrupted and possibly cancelled. A Met Office spokesperson said temperatures across Scotland and Northern Ireland are expected to drop sharply following a squally band of rain on Wednesday, with frequently heavy and blustery snow showers arriving from the Atlantic. Away from immediate west-facing coasts, 1 to 3 centimetres and in places 3 to 7 centimetres of snow is likely to build up even at low levels, whereas on higher ground, some places could see 10 to 20 centimetres building up by Thursday morning. The showers will be accompanied by strong blustery winds with gusts of 45 to 55 mph possible and a chance of 65 mph on coasts. Blizzard conditions are likely over higher ground. There is a small chance that some of the showers could be accompanied by frequent lightning, which could impact power supplies, including some places outside the warning area. As the warning winds down, snow is expected to turn back to rain and sleet on Thursday evening. The high winds and heavy snow have been causing travel disruption across the country this morning, with heavy traffic building up on motorways and some bridges being temporarily closed. The Erskine Bridge was temporarily shut due to the high winds, but has since reopened. Scotland's road maintenance firm Bayer has been out this morning to grit the roads and make driving conditions as safe as possible. ScotRail have said that services are expected to be affected by the weather and have already laid out blanket speed restrictions for certain routes. Network Rail added that they are expecting high winds in the central belt but don't expect any major disruption. For transport to islands on the west coast of Scotland, CalMac ferries have stated all sailings remain liable to disruption or cancellation at short notice. The impacted areas are Highland and Eilean Sear, Highland Sear Highland, South West Scotland, Lothian and Borders, Dumfries and Galloway, East Lothian, Edinburgh, Midlothian Council, Scottish Borders and West Lothian, Strathclyde, Argyll and Bute, East Ayrshire, East Dunbartonshire, East Renfrewshire, Glasgow, Inverclyde, North Ayrshire, North Lanarkshire, Renfrewshire, South Ayrshire, South Lanarkshire, West Dunbartonshire. This article was written by Josh Carmichael.
Recorded from the Herald on the 24th of February 2022, from the sports section, Rangers FC News Roundup, Borussia Dortmund build-up, team news and Ryan Kent on Alfredo Morelos, by Aidan Smith. It seems like an eternity ago that Rangers dismantled Borussia Dortmund on their own patch in the Europa League, and now the second leg is upon us. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side lead 4-2 in aggregate ahead of Ibrox showdown, so tonight's clash is set to be a cracker. Can Rangers book their spot in the last 16, or will Dortmund pull through with a big performance? Here are the main headlines ahead of tonight's big game. Aaron Ramsey out for Rangers. Aaron Ramsey will miss Rangers' Europa League showdown with Borussia Dortmund this Thursday through injury. The Welsh international played a part in the first leg after appearing off the bench for the final 5 minutes plus stoppage time. But Ramsey missed Sunday's Premiership clash against Dundee United, and it has now been confirmed that he will miss tomorrow's European clash. Dortmund result would top the lot. Alan Hutton reckons that if Rangers can progress to the last 16 of the Europa League at the expense of Borussia Dortmund, the result would have to go down as one of the greatest in the club's history. The former Ibrox defender played in the 3-0 win over Lyon in 2007, widely considered to be one of the finest away performances by a Scottish side in decades, and was also in the starting 11 for the return fixture as the French champions extracted their revenge with a 3-0 win of their own. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's men secured a famous 4-2 victory over Borussia Dortmund in Germany last week and welcomed the Bundesliga giants to Ibrox tonight for the second leg. Kent and Morelos. Ryan Kent says he is always looking to feed the ball into Alfredo Morelos because he knows that if he supplies the ammunition, his teammate has the finishing ability to devastate the opposition. The Rangers pair will tonight face Borussia Dortmund in the second leg of the Europa League encounter, and both players were on form in the 4-2 win in Germany last week. Kent has played alongside Morelos at Ibrox for 4 years, and the duo combined to brilliant effect at Signal Iduna Park as Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's men gained the upper hand in the tie. That article was by Aidan Smith.
Herald Scotland recorded on Wednesday, 2nd of March 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Interview. Comic actor Jack Docherty takes his one-man play on the road, by Lorraine Wilson. Actor and writer Jack Docherty's one-man play, set against the backdrop of a one-night stand in the 1980s, was a fringe hit last year. Now he's taking the show on the road around Scotland. In many ways, Jack Docherty is the quiet man of Scottish comedy. Even though he's been at the heart of some of the most successful comedy shows of the past 4 decades, as a writer, performer and producer, we know very little about him. That's why his new one-man play, Nothing But, comes as something of a surprise. Or does it? There we are again. How much of the seemingly autobiographical nature of the play that made critics' top 10 lists at last year's Edinburgh Fringe is really true? It's a play about me putting on a show, he says. I'm trying to reconnect with a woman I had a one-night stand with in Edinburgh in the 1980s. I find out via the internet that she's coming to the festival again, so I do hope this is the hope of bumping into her again. It's chasing a lost romance, but there's another story about a lost connection in there. If it's not strictly autobiographical, it certainly draws from the experience of life of anyone who's dancing around the big 6-0. Things like unrequited love, obsession over the years, how the internet changed the world, fatherhood, distant fathers, divorce, marrying the wrong person. You know, it's all those kinds of topics. Although the play is set in Edinburgh, the topics are universal. Jack will certainly see enough of Scotland as he heads off in March on a 17-date tour, brackets, with shows being added, close brackets, before taking the show into the Soho Theatre in London at the end of April. The play did so well in Edinburgh that Karen, brackets, Corrin, artistic director of Gilded Balloon, close brackets, said, "Why don't we tour it?" The Fringe experience last year was different. Instead of 160 in the Gilded Balloon dining room venue, we could only have 80, and for ventilation we had the back door open so there was light flooding into a room that would normally be dark. I could see people. Standing solo on a stage isn't something that Jack has done often. His long-running successful role as Chief Commissioner Cameron Mickelson came without the rest of the Scot Squad for a solo show at the King's Theatre in Glasgow a few years ago. Mickelson is still a character. It was still a play rather than straight stand-up. It was an unusual moment. I would turn and wonder where Maury, brackets Hunter, long-term writing partner and fellow Absolutely cast member, close brackets, was. Normally you would have a breather and someone else would be doing something, but suddenly it's just you. But then of course you're getting all the laughter and all the money, he laughs. He adds that he's been asked why the Chief isn't going on tour. Clearly it would be quite a good earner, but the idea of nothing but and being himself, but not quite, excites him most. There's definitely a little more light and shade in Nothing But, and that ability to turn on audiences' emotions is another challenge for the writer and performer in Jack. There are a couple of serious bits that I haven't tried before. That's quite scary. Oh God, the audience have gone very quiet, and then you think, oh no, that's a good thing, that's good, they're meant to be quiet. If they were laughing at this, we'd be in big trouble. Jack recalls seeing a master in the craft of being able to turn on audiences' emotions seemingly effortlessly. I was a really young man, I saw Jim Broadbent live. He was riveting. You'd be crying with laughter one moment, and then in a moment he'd be breaking your heart. It was amazing to experience. Another benefit of the one-man experience is a minimal crew. Travelling light gives greater flexibility and the chance to see places he hasn't visited before. That's one of the great things about this tour, is getting to see Scotland. It's a tiny crew, a minimal set, and we can take that to the tiniest halls in the Highlands or the largest venues in the cities. I've never been to Ullapool. I'm really excited about that. Jack moved south when he was in his 20s, along with writing partner Maury Hunter. He remembers the days in Edinburgh typing out scripts, putting them in envelopes, sending them, and then waiting for the response. When I tell my kids that, they just can't get their heads around it. There was writing successes with Spitting Image, Alas Smith and Jones, The Lenny Henry Show, Vic Reeves' Big Night Out. 4 series of Absolutely for Channel 4 followed, a sketch show that can rightly be described as influential in its slightly surreal outlook. Jack decided not to take part when the rest of the cast brought Absolutely back for a Radio 4 revival a few years ago. It just really wasn't for me. I was happy for them to use the characters I'd created for the TV series, but I didn't go down and see it being recorded. What are they doing with my legacy? I'm joking, of course, but it shows the staying power of what we did back then. It was all quite innocent and childlike, and it seems that thanks to YouTube, another generation is enjoying it. As he points out, Jack has spent 2/3 of his life in England, but thanks to his involvement in Scot Squad plus various specials, he's had even more excuses to head home. That connection never goes, of course. I've been in England so long and this is where my kids were brought up, but I've never felt any less Scottish. Now that they're grown-ups, my wife and I do discuss coming home. My mother and sister are still in Edinburgh too. With the amount of work for Scot Squad, I do feel like I live in both places sometimes, and this tour is a great opportunity to see so much of the country. I've never really done social media, but an online tour video diary might be an idea this time, even just to document it for myself. It's another wee challenge, I like those. In March, Jack brings Nothing But to the Beacon Arts Centre, Greenock, on Friday 11, Eastgate Theatre, Peebles, on Thursday 17, Tivoli Theatre, Aberdeen, on Friday 18, Perth Theatre on Saturday 19, and Oranmore, Glasgow, on Tuesday 22 and Wednesday 23. For dates across Scotland in April, visit www.gildedballoon.co.uk. By Lorraine Wilson.
The Herald, Friday the 25th of February 2022. News. Glasgow petition called to name new bridge after Billy Connolly. This article is by Deborah Anderson. A petition has been launched calling for Glasgow's new bridge to be named in honour of Sir Billy Connolly. Work is currently underway on the £29.5 million Govan to Partick, and now calls have been made for it to be named the Big Yin Bridge. More than 600 people have already signed the petition, which urges Glasgow City Council to consider the move. Last November, Glasgow City Council awarded a contract to build a new footbridge between Point House Quay in Partick and Water Row in Govan. The bridge is due to be completed by 2023. The petition on the change.org website said, with his formative years spent in Stuartville Street and at St Peter's Primary north of the river before attending St Gerard's Secondary, commuting from Drumchapel, no less, and becoming an apprentice at Alexander Stevens south of the river, there can surely be no more fitting name than entitling this bridge after the legendary Sir Billy Connolly. With the Big Yin suffering from Parkinson's disease, such a tribute within his lifetime linking two areas of the city so indelibly connected with one of Glasgow's and Scotland's most beloved sons would be no more than the great figure deserves. Farron's Construction Limited were awarded the contract, which is part of the Glasgow City Region City deal. The £29.5 million project includes the construction of a new pedestrian oblique cycle bridge over the River Clyde between Water Row in Govan and Point House Quay in Partick, a connection that will re-establish the historic link between the two areas. The bridge will be economically, environmentally and socially important as it will create a link between communities, visitor attractions and institutions of national economic importance, and is a key part of the active travel route between the University of Glasgow's campus at Gilmore Hill and the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. This article is by Deborah Anderson. The Herald, Friday the 25th of February 2022. News. Scots ministers in Calmac acting unlawfully over the way ferries are run. This article is by Martin Williams. Ministers and executives of the state-owned ferry operator Calmac have been warned they are acting unlawfully in the way that Scotland's ferry services have been operating. A ferry user group has written to the Transport Minister warning there has been a failure to conduct island communities' impact assessments, which are an integral part of the Scottish Government's groundbreaking Islands Act, which was made law in 2018. Public bodies are tasked by law to consider the specific needs of islands when developing policies and strategies. The question of law has come as users demand changes to what they call a discriminatory first-come, first-service booking service for Lifeline ferries, which is seeing islanders having to book 3 to 4 weeks in advance just to get on and off. Transport Scotland has been told that the system is prejudiced against people who have to make journeys at short notice and prioritise those who can book in advance. The Mull and Iona Ferry Committee has now written to the Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth, to warn that neither Calmac or the Scottish Government agency Transport Scotland have followed their legal obligations under the Islands Act. The committee say that an impact assessment should have been undertaken to assess the much criticised first-come, first-served booking policy that Transport Scotland instruct Calmac to apply. Unlawful is the right way to describe it, said Committee Chairman Joe Reid. We can find no one on Mull who was consulted about the ticketing system. Regardless of the Islands Act, Islanders are the most frequent users with most complex ticketing needs. Neither CalMac nor Transport Scotland seem to understand island life, but worse than that, what we have learned is that they don't understand island law either. The Islands Act was put in place by this government, but their own agencies don't seem to have read it. The first-come, first-served booking system is inherently prejudiced against islanders. It effectively gives priority to anyone who can book their journey far in advance. So holidaymakers buy their tickets first, and local residents have to take what's left over. When the network is so short of deck space, prioritising who can board based on how far ahead you can book your journey is crude and unfair. Family visits, hospital appointments, livestock movements, funerals and much more cannot be arranged weeks ahead of time. Yet often these are the most important journeys of all. Demand has been stimulated by a new charging structure which has led to an estimated average fare reduction of 34% for passengers and 40% for car traffic on the CalMac network. Islanders are competing for spaces on ferries as those planning a staycation break who can book weeks or months ahead of time, so those travellers fill up the bookings first. With a new IT and ticketing system due to be introduced this year, Islanders have called for the scrapping of the first-come, first-served principle. Maury Finch, General Manager of the Mull and Iona Community Trust, said, "The Islands Act is a powerful piece of legislation designed to overcome many of the unique disadvantages of living on an island, but unless it's respected and understood by the people who should be observing it, there's little hope it will have the impact it should. I'm quite flabbergasted that CalMac and Transport Scotland have had to have their legal obligations pointed out to them by a volunteer ferry committee, but hopefully we will now get the effective and meaningful consultation the Islands Acts promise." The issues have been exacerbated with a series of breakdowns to the CalMac fleet of 31 ageing ferries during the busy summer tourism period, which have raised concerns about the continuing resilience of vessels. Sam Bourne, chairman of the Arran Ferry Action Group, supported calls for changes, saying passengers were being hampered by what he called the outdated booking system. Ferry users say a proportion of deck space should be bookable for island residents only and essential travellers such as GPs. They say travellers should be encouraged to use particular sailings. Mull Community Council Chairman Tom Nelson said it was time for change. "We have no choice but to use the ferry. It is our lifeline," he said. "If it's full, we can't travel. If a train is sold out, you can choose another route or fly or drive instead. But if the ferry is full, that's it. We're stuck. Weather looking good and you want to go on a trip? No chance unless you checked the forecast weeks ago. Need to go on a business trip in a hurry? Forget it. Family member passed away in the mainland? Cross your fingers that a holidaymaker has missed the ferry." A Transport Scotland spokesman said, "We recognise the frustration from communities around the pressures with the ferry network, but Scottish ministers are aware of the responsibilities under the Islands Act. In addition to our commitment of investing at least £580 million in new vessels over the next 5 years, we are open to exploring other options to ensure we are making the best use of current deck space and meeting the needs of the communities we serve. We will respond to the committee in due course." This article is by Martin Williams. The Herald, Friday the 25th of February 2022. News. Trans and inclusive vocabulary added to Scottish Gaelic. This article is by Caroline Wilson. Gender-inclusive additions to the Gaelic language have been welcomed by parents amid controversy over self-identification law changes. Trans and non-binary young people from the Highlands were interviewed about their experiences for a new BBC Eorpa documentary. While it isn't known how many transgender people there are in the Highlands, numbers are growing and new Gaelic words have been created to reflect the differences between sex and gender. Dr. Rachel Allen, a psychologist and Gaelic speaker from Glasgow, who took part in the programme, said its creators were conscious that many people watching the programme might not be aware of the correct terms, particularly in Gaelic. She said, Gni beth eochiatach was used to denote sex, which she described as male or female usually, according to chromosomes and hormones and charted at birth. She said Gni, translated as gender, explaining that it is connected with behaviours and how a person feels within themselves, while neo-binaireach is Gaelic for non-binary. For the programme, the BBC spoke to LGBT plus groups on social media and other organisations which provide material for schools to pull together terminology that was already being used, but it was the first time all the terms had appeared together. The changes were welcomed by Brian, the father of teenager Ro, who took part in the documentary and identifies as non-binary. He said, we need new vocab in the Gaelic world anyway. Sometimes it takes a bit of time. I think with social media, it is much easier to get those messages out there, terminology and everything else, and I am very happy to use it. My advice to parents would be to talk to your children, make sure you are listening to them and that you're not imposing your views on them all the time. Also talk to other parents who may be going through the same thing. Just accept it. Rose said their parents had been very supportive of their life-changing decision. They said, when I was really young, I didn't think about gender or sexuality. I always played with the boys and didn't like girly things. It was hard hearing people call me her and girl all the time. I started using the name Ro in school, first of all, with my friends. I was around 13. And then when I was used to it, I asked my family to call me Ro. It took them a while to get used to it, but then it was good. Language is always evolving. People are making new words for people like me, and we have to start using those words. If I say I'm non-binary, you should just accept it. It comes as a last-ditch effort to stop Scots from being able to self-identify their gender in this year's census, regardless of their legal status, failed. Campaign group Fair Play for Women lost its appeal yesterday against a decision made by Lord Sanderson, who ruled transgender people can give a different answer from the sex on their birth certificate without the need for a gender recognition certificate, GRC. EORPA reporter Annabelle McClellan also spoke to Melvin, a student and trans man who is originally from the Netherlands and fluent despite only starting to learn Gaelic 2 years ago. He said, I've seen people who are much older than me who are open about being trans. That's important too. Seeing that there is a future for you, that you can live your whole life as yourself. It would have been good to have had that when I was at school. The waiting list for an initial consultation to begin the process of transitioning is 3 years. I'm quite fortunate that I can go to a private clinic, but it's not easy for many people and not good for their mental health because you feel uncomfortable in your body. I don't like using the toilet if there aren't any gender-neutral ones. When toilets are gendered, I don't know which one to use. The documentary also heard from supporters and opponents of reform of the Gender Recognition Act, which will also cut the period in which applicants need to have lived in their required gender before it is officially recognised to 3 months. Melvin said some people know they are trans when they are 8 years old, so I don't think it's fair that they should have to wait so long. Sarah, an American who has lived in the Highlands for 20 years, didn't come out as a trans woman until she was in her 30s and told of her apprehension about telling work colleagues. She said it got to the point where I was Sarah everywhere apart from at work. When she did come out, she said the company, a building firm, were really supportive and had a going away party for her former self. Even the rougher around the edges people in the company were accepting, she said. When it comes to the bigotry and the hatred that is directed against us, it makes it hard, and that's what the people who are against us want. With increased visibility of people like me, the people who do not want us to exist are also more visible, and they are loud. We are seen as dangerous, and it's bigotry. Ultimately, it comes down to power. Who gets to decide I'm a woman? Isn't that my decision? The documentary is available to watch on the BBC iPlayer until March the 19th. This article is by Caroline Wilson.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 28th of February 2022, from the sports section. Rangers blow Premiership chance after Celtic stumble as Motherwell snatch Ibrox draw. By Christopher Jack, senior Rangers writer. The Europa League continues to come at a cost for Rangers. For the second successive week, heroics against Borussia Dortmund were followed by haplessness in the Premiership. This draw with Motherwell will hurt the champions. If their title isn't defended, it will be added to the list of self-inflicted blows that will have denied Rangers the crown this term. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side took to the park with a dream scenario, one that could even see them regain top spot in the standings by next Saturday. In their minds, they left it with only regrets and feeling of what might have been, or what should have been. Seeing Celtic held by Hibernian got this Sunday afternoon off to a perfect start for Rangers, but they couldn't capitalise, and there was no momentum swing or point shift as Van Bronckhorst's side faltered once again. This was arguably the worst of the lot so far. Their form right now is not that of challengers, never mind champions. If it is not rectified as a matter of urgency, then all the plaudits and praise earned on the continent will count for nothing. Perhaps the exertions against Dortmund took their toll here. In the end, Rangers were left to rue their own fallibilities and profligacies, as points were squandered in dreadful fashion. The scenes from that thrilling, exhilarating Europa League night will live long in the memory, but they had to be consigned to the past for Rangers. You are, after all, only as good as your last game, and the mood is now very different at Ibrox after their latest domestic stumble. Rangers' patchy form in recent weeks saw their lead turn into a deficit and the superiority shift across the city. This was a chance to regain it, but Rangers blew it spectacularly. An own goal from Bevis Mugabe and a strike from Fashion Sakala had Rangers in control at the break, but the second half wasn't the cruise to victory that was expected. In the end, only a point was earned. As Rangers dropped their levels, Motherwell raised their game. A Jordan Roberts effort ensured there was angst and anxiousness as the game entered the final stages, and the finale was frantic when Kane Woolery fired home to bring the visitors level. There was no way back for the champions. Time will tell you just how costly this afternoon proves to be as the title race took another unexpected twist. Rangers committed the unforgivable error last weekend as they failed to capitalise on their win in Dortmund and dropped points to Dundee United. Doing so again here was even worse. There was a purpose and intent about the way in which Van Bronckhorst's side started, but it didn't last. Motherwell weren't killed off like it seemed they would be, and eventually the visitors got their rewards. Alfredo Morelos would clip the bar inside 2 minutes after getting on the end of a James Tavernier pass, while the captain was denied by a terrific Liam Kelly save after working a short corner with Ryan Kent and curling an effort towards the top corner. It was defence versus attack in the opening stages. Kelly ensured that Motherwell's resistance continued as he tipped away a final strike from John Lundstrom, but the goal was coming as Rangers pressed and probed, reset and went again. After 22 minutes, the champions had their lead. Kent's cross from the right was teasing, and Mugabe, under pressure from Morelos, inadvertently diverted a header inside the near post. The celebrations were muted from the striker, but the scenes in the stands were more joyous as Rangers had the breakthrough that their play merited. Victory was seemingly within Rangers' sights as Motherwell attempted to regroup and ensure the deficit didn't increase. That ambition lasted just seconds. Kent and Morelos were again involved as the Colombian flicked on a cross inside the area. On the angle, Sakala rifled a low shot across goal as he netted against the Steelmen for the 5th time this term. Motherwell, perhaps fortunate to still have a full quota on the park as Joe Efford launched into a challenge with Connor Goldson, survived a handball appeal and carried no attacking threat. Clear-cut chances didn't arrive with regularity as the minutes ticked on, but Rangers were still in complete control. That was given up and never regained. Just minutes after the restart, Rangers received a reality check. Out of nowhere, Motherwell were level as Roberts tapped home from close range after good work from Woolery down the right. That moment wasn't in the script for Rangers, and a booking from Morelos after a tirade towards the linesman when his header was ruled out for offside was a sign of frustration. When Frank Connor raised his flag to deny Morelos for the second time, Ibrox showed its anger. After finishing from close range, the striker had completed his celebratory knee slide before realising that the goal wouldn't stand. With 15 minutes remaining, the comeback was completed for Motherwell as Woolery scored here for the second time this term. Tavernier and Goldson were beaten far too easily, and Alan McGregor couldn't stop a low strike as his near post. Rangers became increasingly desperate. Bodies powered forward and hope more than expectation as Motherwell stood firm, and the addition of 3 minutes would infuriate Ibrox and leave Van Bronckhorst shaking his head in disbelief. That time wasn't enough for Rangers, and a wild effort from Joey Rebo was their last effort. The chance had gone, and so had 2 crucial points. The chorus of boos that reverberated around the stands at the final whistle told their own story. It was the Motherwell fans who partied to I'm Feeling It, the song that was the backing track on Thursday night. On this occasion, the only feelings Rangers had were ones of anger and regret. Come the end of the season, they could well be even more profound if the title ultimately slips away. And that was a piece by Christopher Jack. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 28th of February 2022, from the sports section, Rugby. Scotland 17, France 36. Six Nations hope shattered by impressive Blues. By senior sports writer Stuart Bathgate. There is no shame at all in losing to a French team of this quality, but there will be a lot of disquiet in the Scotland camp about both the scale and the nature of the defeat, as the home team's hopes of challenging for the championship were comprehensively shattered. France had not merely remained steadily on course for their first Grand Slam and first Six Nations title since 2012, they accelerated towards that destination with a performance of devastating effectiveness. They scored 6 tries, thanks in large part to some sumptuous offloading, and might easily have had 2 or 3 more. Had fullback Melvin Jaminet been on form with the boot, they would have passed the 40-point mark. Scotland managed 2 tries, one in the first half from Rory Darge, who was his team's most impressive player in the first start, and the other late in the second by Duhan van der Merwe. They too might well have had a couple more, from Ali Price and Stuart Hogg, but the former's effort was deemed not to have been touched down, and the captain's chance went when he knocked on a difficult pass from Chris Harris. France went on to score at the end of the first half to go in at the break with a 19-10 lead, and they scored again within minutes of the restart to emphasise their superiority. Given those tries and the Scots' 2 near misses, it could be argued that in the last minutes before the interval constituted the crux of the match, perhaps even a turning point. But that would be too flattering to the home team and too dismissive of France's evident quality. At best, Scotland stayed closer during that middle section of the match. It would only have delayed what already seemed inevitable, a defeat that has ended their hopes of being in the running for this year's championship. After all, the signs were ominous nearly from the start. France did manage a couple of errors before they settled down into their rhythm, with Roman Ntamak sending his kick-off out in the full, and Melvin Jaminet missing a very kickable penalty. But by the time Paul Vermels opened the scoring with a try from an Anthony Dupont break, it was clear they were very much in the mood to do severe damage to their opponents. A penalty from Finn Russell got Scotland off the mark, but the French then took command with a second try thanks to some inspired recycling, above all from the loose-head prop Cyril Bailey, who offloaded the scoring pass to Yoram Moefana, despite the best efforts of 5 defenders to shut him down. Price's near thing was followed by a touchdown that counted, with Darge finishing off by wrong-footing 2 defenders. Russell converted to put Scotland to within 2 points, and the picture would have brightened further if Hogg had held on to Harry's pass, or the centre had carried further before distributing. As it was, a 10-12 deficit at the break would have been an acceptable outcome given the balance of play, but on the brink of half-time, Gail Ficou claimed his team's third try. It began with a penalty to touch on the right, then Jonathan Dante bounced a tackle before Moefano was held up on the left. The ball was sent back to the right, and Ficou would manage to drift over to the far corner, not even needing to use Perna outside him. Harris failed the head injury assessment and was replaced by Mark Bennett at the start of the second half, after a couple of minutes in which Dante stretched his team's lead. Price lost possession in the tackle, France counter-attacked, and a kick ahead was collected by the centre who ran on unopposed. We had to wait until the hour mark for the fifth try, which came after Dage was turned over. Another lightning-quick counter-attack got the ball to Damien Penaud, who almost strolled across the line. The Scotland bench was empty just after that score, but the arrival of fresh legs failed to provide the requisite injection of energy and direction. And, with the home team looking ragged, almost all of the last quarter became an exhibition class in French continuity. With 5 minutes left, Penaud scored again from an Ntamak cross kick this time. But Scotland at least had the last word, as Blair Kinghorn embarked on a solo break which began in apparently unthreatening fashion, but ended with him putting Van der Merwe in for a score that was no more than the slightest of consolations. With Russell off the field, Hogg added the 2 points. It is now next stop Italy for Scotland a week on Saturday, where they will try once more to put in the kind of performance that has evaded them thus far. For France, the next date is Cardiff, and the fourth stage of their bid for a Grand Slam which their talents appear to richly deserve. Scorers: Scotland, tries, Darge, Van der Merwe, conversions, Russell, Hogg, penalty, Russell. France, tries, Williams, Moefana, Ficou, Dante, Penaud, 2. Conversions, Yamine, 3. The referee was Kay Dixon of England. And that was an article by Stuart Bathgate.
Herald Scotland recorded on Monday 28th of February 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Issue of the day, Never Gonna Give Up 1980s Music, by Maureen Sugden, reporter. It was the era of soft rock, new wave and pure pop, with power ballads and powerful rock songs riding high in the charts, and it seems you can't keep 1980s music down. Oh, don't you just love a bit of 80s music? You're not alone if this is your train of thought, as some of the biggest bands and singers of the era are back in the limelight and in the charts. Which acts? From Tears for Fears to Spandau Ballet's frontman Tony Hadley, and from Simple Minds to Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue, the airwaves and charts of late have been sprinkled with plenty of stars and bands who became superstars in the era. Tears for Fears. English rockers Tears for Fears, who were 1980s headliners with iconic tracks such as Shout and Everybody Wants to Rule the World, are back with a new album, The Tipping Point, with its first 2 singles, the album namesake, The Tipping Point and No Small Thing, all over Radio 2, before the duo of Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith tour the world from May. Hadley. Former Spandau Ballet singer Tony, who famously sang Always Believe in Your Soul, Gold, announced in 2017 that he was no longer a member of the iconic band. He now has a new radio-friendly single, Because of You, and in Match, is embarking on a 40th anniversary tour that will take him across the UK, including dates in Perth, Glasgow and Edinburgh. Jason and Kylie too. The Australian pop stars found themselves back in the top 10 earlier this month when their classic 1989 track, Especially For You, rocketed back up the charts as part of a campaign by ardent fans not only of their music but of Neighbours, the Australian soap opera that propelled them to fame. The soap is at risk of coming to an end, and a coordinated social media effort to relentlessly stream the duet met with chart success. Who else? Simple Minds began in the 1970s in Glasgow, of course, But Don't You Forget About Me, the anthem from the hit 1985 movie The Breakfast Club, rocketed the Scots Stars to global stardom, and frontman Jim Kerr and guitar supremo Charlie Burchill are both 62 now, but still going strong. Just like aforementioned acts Tears for Fears, they too performed in Radio 2's Piano Room on Ken Bruce's morning show in recent days, serenading listeners with the help of the BBC Concert Orchestra, and are also heading out on tour. New music is also afoot as Kerr told listeners songs were coming soon. And Rick Astley's 1987 Never Gonna Give You Up track is still all over the internet, with rickrolling a continuing viral trend, where the video for the song appears unexpectedly in online links. What's up with Le Bon? Simon Le Bon and his band Duran Duran, whose new album Future Past peaked at 3 in the UK album chart, are in the running for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2022 in the United States. The prestigious honour is being prepared via an online poll, with the top 5 artists, as selected by the public, going into a fans' ballot, and at last count, Duran Duran were in pole position with more than 468,000 votes, 20,000 ahead of Eminem. Le Bon said just to make it onto the nominations list is an honour that I never expected to experience, but for sure this distinction is due in large part to the fact that we have an army of fans around the world who have unwaveringly supported us for the past 4 decades. By Maureen Sugden.
The Herald, Monday the 28th of February 2022. News. COVID Scotland, 5,498 new cases and no deaths recorded. This article is by Caitlin Dewar. The Scottish Government has recorded more than 5,000 new coronavirus cases and no further deaths have been reported overnight. According to the latest Scottish Government figures, 5,498 new cases of COVID-19 have been recorded in the past 24 hours. This figure includes cases identified using either a first lateral flow device or PCR positive test. No further deaths have been reported of someone who tested positive for the virus over the past 28 days. The death toll therefore stands at 10,672 since the beginning of the pandemic. Separate figures produced by National Records of Scotland, NRS, which record the number of deaths where COVID was mentioned on a death certificate, put the figure at 13,235 as of February the 20th. NRS figures include deaths where suspected or probable COVID-19 appears on the death certificate. A total of 19 people are currently being treated in intensive care with recently confirmed COVID-19, with 1,175 in hospital who had recently contracted the virus overall. The total number of first vaccinations given is 4,436,113, while 4,157,209 people have now received a second dose. 3,430,747 have received a third dose or booster vaccine. This article is by Caitlin Dewar.
Reported from the Herald on the 1st of March 2022 from the sports section, Celtic FC News Roundup, Gio Kamaka's 50-50 update, Australia tournament and Christie dispels London claims by David Urban. Celtic today revealed they'll take part in a 4-team tournament in Australia in November. The Hoops will travel down under as Ange Postecoglou returns to his homeland for the competition. Meanwhile, Ryan Christie gave his side on Neil Lennon's claims players the Celtic wanted to leave during his time in charge. And Georgios Giacomakis was ruled 50-50 to play in tomorrow's night's clash with St Mirren. Giacomakis fitness update. Celtic star Georgios Giacomakis has been ruled as a 50-50 for tomorrow's match against St Mirren. The striker wasn't involved at the weekend as Ange Postecoglou's men drew 0-0 away at Easter Road. Instead, Jason Miedo led the line with Liel Abada and Jota playing off either side. Kyogo is said to be nowhere near a return to fitness according to Postecoglou himself. Celtic to play in a 4-team Australia tournament. Celtic will play in a 4-team friendly tournament in Australia this November. The trip down under will signal a homecoming for Ange Postecoglou, with the Aussie having not been home in his native land for nearly 3 years. He will take his Hoops side to take part in the competition for the 2022 World Cup is going on in Qatar. Like most leagues around the world, Premiership will go into a 5-week shutdown from mid-November to mid-December. Ryan Christie dispels Neil Lennon claims. Scotland star Ryan Christie has dispelled Neil Lennon's claims that several Celtic players wanted to leave at the beginning of last season. The attacking midfielder was part of the Hoop squad that endured a torrid time as their 10-in-a-row dream soon turned into a nightmare as they suffered a full campaign without a trophy until Rangers left the title. Lennon was ultimately sacked before the season was up, as his team slipped further and further behind Stephen Gerrard's side at the time. The Northern Irishman was clearly unhappy with some of his first-team stars early in that campaign, as he claimed that any of them who wanted to leave were free to do so. The article was by David Urban. Recorded from the Herald on the 1st of March 2022 from the sports section. Rangers FC News Roundup. 5 out against St Johnstone. Unjust McGregor criticism and points target. By David Urban. Rangers take on St Johnstone in a full card of Scottish Premiership action tomorrow night. But they'll do so without 5 first-team stars who Giovanni Van Bronckhorst confirmed will miss the match. James Tavernier sent his support to Alan McGregor as he blasted unjust criticism of the stopper, and Barry Ferguson outlined an ambitious points target he reckons his old side must achieve to retain the title this year. Rangers fitness update ahead of St Johnstone. Rangers manager Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has delivered an injury update on his first-team squad. The Ibrox club travel to Perth tomorrow evening as they face 11th spot St Johnstone in a midweek Premiership clash. They will make the journey without 5 first-team stars, as Aaron Ramsey's injury continues to hold back the Welshman on loan from Juventus. Whilst he is on the training pitch, he's currently joined on the sidelines by fellow loanee Ahmed Diallo, as well as Stephen Davis, Ryan Jack and Philippe Helander, have all had their injury issues this campaign. Tavernier backs McGregor. Rangers skipper James Tavernier has thrown his support behind Alan McGregor amid recent scrutiny of his performances. The Ibrox captain insists criticism of the veteran keeper has been unjust, and the whole first-team squad and coaching staff are behind the 40-year-old. McGregor has made some high-profile errors since the winter break, which has directly cost his side goals. But Tavernier says the ex-Scotland stopper is still very much a key player for Rangers, and that his contribution can't be understated. Barry Ferguson sets Rangers' points target. Rangers legend Barry Ferguson reckons his old side will need to win all 10 remaining league matches to retain their Premiership crown this season. The Ibrox hero insists the title is still well within Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side's reach, as they trail Celtic 3 points at the summit of Scotland's top flight. Both hold firms clubs' top points at the weekend, with Celtic drawing 0-0 away to Hibs, and Rangers letting a 2-0 lead slip ahead against Motherwell to finish in a stalemate at Ibrox. And Ferguson admits there is no doubt Rangers must earn 30 points out of a possible 30 between now and May. The article was by David Urban.
An article from the Herald Scotland, Tuesday, the 1st of March 2022, from the Arts and Entertainment section. Nicola Benedetti is surprise new director of Edinburgh International Festival by Terry Jameson, senior features writer. The Scottish violinist Nicola Benedetti has been named as the surprise new director of the Edinburgh International Festival. Benedetti, 34, will become the first female and the first Scottish festival director since the festival began in 1947. The Grammy and Brit Award-winning musician will take up the role in October. She will replace Fergus Lynon, who has been in charge for the last 8 years and guided the festival through the challenge of the pandemic in recent years. I am deeply honoured to contribute to the long and rich history of the Edinburgh International Festival and the cultural landscape of Scotland, Benedetti, now Director Designate of Edinburgh International Festival, said of her appointment. This festival was founded on principles of reconciliation and the ideals of art transcending political and cultural fracture. Following in the footsteps of the wonderful achievements of Fergus Lynon and his predecessors, I will uphold these values and greatly look forward to serving this festival, its mission of cultural exchanges, and the people of Scotland. The announcement has been welcomed by Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. The Edinburgh International Festival has a worldwide reputation for its excellent work in bringing world-leading artists together, celebrating the performing arts and promoting Scotland's rich culture and heritage to an international audience, the First Minister said. I'm sure that people across the country are looking forward to supporting the festival's full in-person return after 2 years and welcoming visitors and artists from around the world to Scotland. I welcome Nicola Benedetti's appointment as director, especially as she becomes the first woman to ever hold the role. Her experience in promoting Scotland's cultural scene to audiences around the world will be invaluable, and I wish her every success. Benedetti will now combine her new role with her international and her leadership role in the Benedetti Foundation, which she set up to promote music education. It's such a pleasure to welcome Nicola Benedetti as both the first woman and the first Scottish director of the Edinburgh International Festival. Keith Skeoch, Chair of the Board of Trustees, Edinburgh International Festival, said of the appointment. In many ways, she reflects the spirit of this festival. Internationally recognised and respected, but Scottish to her core, she's dedicated to advocating world-class music making and innovating new ways to bring it to audiences. As an artist, her string of collaborators reads like a who's who of the world of classical music, and as an educator, she has reached tens of thousands worldwide. I have no doubt that she will bring a wealth of new ideas to the organisation and build on Fergus's exceptional work from the last 8 years. Leonie Bell, chair of Edinburgh International Festival Nominations Committee, added, "This is a hugely exciting appointment for the Edinburgh International Festival. Nicola is a world-renowned and world-class musician and performer, as well as being a dedicated and passionate ambassador for the arts and its transformative power to change lives. Nicola will also become the first woman and Scottish person to lead the festival in its 75-year history. I know everyone who holds the Edinburgh International Festival close to their hearts will eagerly anticipate the vision and energy that Nicola will bring to the festival's future." And that was an article by Teddy Jameson, senior features writer. An article from the Herald Scotland, Tuesday, the 1st of March 2022, from the Arts and Entertainment section. Top photojournalist David Pratt on his return to troubled, tortured, tangled Iraq. There was a time not long ago when Iraq never seemed to be out of the news. Its key towns and cities, Mosul, Baghdad, Kirkuk, Basra, Tikrit, Erbil, Al-Fallujah, became ghastly shorthand for bloodshed, terror attacks, human misery piled upon human misery. As the Herald's distinguished photojournalist David Pratt observes, Iraq has been at war of one kind or another since 1979. This troubled, tortured, tangled country is divided along ethnic, tribal and religious lines. It has endured a genocidal dictator and has been invaded, occupied and pulverised by the world's greatest superpower. And all of that is without mentioning the brutal ISIS insurgency. The world has moved on to other trouble spots, Russia's invasion of Ukraine merely being the latest. But Pratt, this newspaper's foreign affairs editor and one of Britain's most accomplished foreign correspondents, has never quite forgotten the complex, beautiful land and its inhabitants. A few months ago, he returned there with the filmmaker Robbie Fraser for a new project. Pictures from Iraq, like its predecessor, Pictures from Afghanistan 2 years ago, will premiere at the Glasgow Film Festival before being screened by BBC Scotland. And, like that earlier film, it's a thought-provoking and quietly riveting piece of work. Part reportage, part travelogue, as Pratt describes it. The camera follows him as he journeys in northern Iraq and Erbil, capital of the Kurdish Autonomous Region. A state within a state, not unlike Catalonia, Quebec or Scotland. There are some 40 million Kurds across Iraq, Iran, Syria and Turkey. Together, they are, by one reckoning, the biggest people in the world without their own state. Saddam Hussein's regime reputedly killed some 100,000 Kurds during the so-called Anfal campaign in the late 1980s. Over 1 million others were displaced. In the film, Pratt is reunited after nearly 6 years with Major General Sirwan Barzani, a legendary figure in the Kurdish army, the Peshmerga, and nephew of a former president of Iraqi Kurdistan, Masoud Barzani. He is also managing director of a mobile phone operator in Iraq with 7 million subscribers and is estimated to be worth some $2 billion. Barzani, a veteran of the long battle against Saddam and, much later, against ISIS, tells Pratt that though the general situation in Erbil is much better than when they last spoke, there are still regular terror attacks being made and some instability. Parked nearby is a cluster of captured VBIEDs, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, ISIS suicide armoured car bombs, in other words. One of them, Pratt is apprehensive to learn, is full of TNT. During the film, Pratt interviews female members of the Kurdistan Freedom Party and meets an old friend, the Swedish-Iraqi journalist Urban Hamid. The duo have covered many conflicts together over the years. The last time they met was in May 2018, en route to Syria. Fraser's evocative footage is interspersed with Pratt's striking photographs and with archive footage of the younger Pratt reporting. For example, on the arrival of the US 173rd Airborne Brigade in northern Iraq in 2003, and on other elements of Iraq's sprawling, bloody recent history. There is also a video of the moment when ISIS Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, at a Mosul mosque, announced the formation of a caliphate stretching from Aleppo in Syria to Diyala in Iraq. What came next, Pratt says in a voiceover, is one of the darkest chapters in human history since the end of the Second World War. The documentary shows northern Iraq as it is today, bustling, cosmopolitan, bewitching. You can see what Pratt means when he says he loves Iraq, as well as Afghanistan and the wider Middle East. Pratt and Fraser shot the documentary and one on the Balkans last September and October. Essentially, with these documentaries, I'm returning to places where I've taken the most significant of my pictures. It all springs from Only with the Heart, a retrospective exhibition of my pictures at the Sogo Arts Gallery in Glasgow in 2019. They're all countries that either are at war or have been at war in some shape or form. In northern Iraq, we crossed through different factions of fighters in northern Iraq. We met Hasht al-Shabi, which is supposedly the Iranian proxy militia. It was interesting to meet up with people like General Barzani. He's one of the wealthiest guys in northern Iraq, but he has earned his stripes. He fought with the Black Tigers, as they're called. He took us to a still active front line where the Black Tigers are still engaged in fighting the last remnants of ISIS. ISIS, incidentally, is regrouping. In Macmur Mountain, there's still a group of them that's laying tunnels and operating in villages under cover and have sleeper cells. It's still an active front line. Indeed, 2 weeks after we left the Macmur Mountain, the same unit we filmed came under attack. They lost 10 men, and the local Kurdish policeman was beheaded by ISIS. So, although it's fair to say that the world's attention has moved away from Iraq, the problems have not gone away, Pratt adds. Not only is ISIS regrouping, but there are also quite a lot of political fault lines between the Kurds and Baghdad, and the extent of Iranian influence, all of which is reflected in the film through a series of encounters. He likens Pictures from Iraq to the late chef Anthony Bourdain's travel documentary, Parts Unknown, where Bourdain used food as the basis, Pratt uses his photography. The documentary, which was jointly funded by BBC Scotland, Screen Scotland, BBC Persian and the international distributor Terra Nova, is set to be screened in July alongside not just Pictures from Afghanistan, but also another new Pratt Fraser project, Pictures from the Balkans, which was shot last year. These are just a reminder of Pratt's remarkable career. Robbie Fraser puts it succinctly. These films are made possible because of David's stellar independent archive of stills and video and his on-the-ground experience from a career of more than 40 years. There are, he says, other countries whose stories he and Pratt would like to tell in this manner. Pratt's extensive archive, after all, extends to Congo, Haiti, Somalia, and Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. Watch this space, Fraser adds. Pictures from Iraq is at the Glasgow Film Theatre at 1:15 p.m. on Sunday, March the 13th, followed by a Q&A with David Pratt. see https://glasgowfilm.org/.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.